Hi, my name is Daudi Mugabi and this is Business Mike episode 29. My guest today is Liz Simpson. She's a life coach and a transformational speaker, also known as the Self-Discovery Diva. In this episode, Liz shares some of the methods she used to become a successful entrepreneur after quitting her well-paying job. All this and more next on Business Mike. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today on Business Mike. Could you briefly tell us a bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. My name is Liz Simpson. I am a women's empowerment speaker, author, and an inside-out success coach. And basically what I do is I specialize in working with women who have survived abuse in their past. So whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, I've written a book and I coach women one-on-one, as well as I have a membership community where I have monthly empowerment and working with survivors of abuse.
What is it that you are doing prior to becoming a transformational speaker? What was the transition between what you are doing in the past and what you're doing now?
Sure. So previous to becoming a full-time speaker, writer, and coach, I had a 10-year span of being in sales. So I did cosmetic sales management, I did medical sales, and ultimately I was an insurance sales agent. So I was a licensed health and life insurance broker, and still I'm technically licensed. And what changed for me is I realized I was at a point in my life where I had met really my financial goals. I was really happy with my husband and children. And I realized that a lot of things on paper that sounded good had manifested in my life, but I still felt like stuck and unfulfilled. And that's when I realized that I still was not living in my purpose. And I met my mentor, another speaker, Delatoro McNeil, who really fired me up and caused a spark. And I realized that, hey, I'm really settling in life and not doing what I'm really called to do. And so after 90 days of meeting my mentor, I made a drastic change. I left my corporate career and went head over heels into my dream.
Right. So why is it that your business focuses on entrepreneurs, women who have survived abuse? Why did you go for that particular niche? Sure.
When I first started speaking, I did not expect to have this niche. I just wanted to empower other people. And the more and more that I started talking about my past as surviving abuse, a lot of women were coming to me in private and saying, thank you for speaking about that. I've survived that as well. And what was interesting is that the women who were approaching me were from all different, socioeconomic statuses. Some were struggling with, financial assistance, and some were leaders of, powerful Fortune 500 companies. So I realized there was a need for someone to really stand for abuse and say, yes, I'm a survivor, but yes, I'm still focused on living my best life. So I do have my membership program. I work with any woman who's a survivor. But when it comes to one-on-one coaching, I have a heart for working with women who are entrepreneurs who have survived abuse, because when you build a business, it really building a business is like standing in front of a mirror. All of the things internally that haven't been worked out will really show up in business. So that's kind of how my niche evolved over time. I definitely didn't expect it to be that when I first started out.
Wow. Are there any inspiring stories from some of the people you've coached? Any way you've transformed them in a positive way?
Most definitely. I've really had some teary moments just hearing some of the testimonials of the women I've worked with. There's one survivor where her abuser was in prison, and she, was a mother with children, and she was someone who was really living for her children, and not really concerned about herself. She thought, all hope was lost for herself. So she really has a powerful testimonial. I did a session with her just the other week, and she was saying how, she feels like she's living her ideal life, like she's living for herself. She started painting. She's looking at exploring relationships. So she feels like she has a new lease on life. A lot of my clients, surprisingly, are women who are middle age, like between 40 to 60 years old, who've had some powerful testimonials about realizing like my life is not over. Like it's still okay for me to start today, and create my dream life. So especially for women clients who are older than me, that's been really emotional just seeing them have breakthroughs and starting today to live their dream life and go after their dreams.
Earlier, you mentioned that you had a job which, quote unquote, was successful, but then you didn't feel fulfilled. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening that are probably in that situation right now, but want to do something that they're passionate about, something they would wake up every day willing to do. Psychologically, what did it take for you to leave the so-called safety net of a regular paycheck to go ahead and venture into your own business?
Sure, it was definitely a process. It's completely taking one hat off and putting another hat on, if you will. Psychologically, some of the things that it took, one was completely shifting my circle. I really had to immerse myself in the world of entrepreneurship. I was looking at the past year. In the past year, I've read over 80 books. I've had 12 coaches and 2 mentors, and I've gone on 8 retreats and conferences. So when we talk about psychologically, it's truly a mental game. You have to commit to renewing your mind and shifting your mindset. So for me, all of my coaches were $1 million coaches who are millionaires, whether it's speaking or retreats or coaches. And it created a new normal in my mind. So I really immersed myself in the world. And now it's really like for me now, working a 9 to 5 is just so unnatural to me because I completely shifted my mindset. So that's one of the big things I would say is if you're interested in it, start reading about it, start finding people who are successful entrepreneurs who you can listen to, learn from, go to events where there's entrepreneurs. Definitely continue to listen to podcasts like this where interviews are being done with entrepreneurs so that it creates a new reality in your mind.
For anyone listening that perhaps wants to venture into a business whereby there are mentors out there that they can look up to, what are some of the first steps they can take to meet people that are inspirational to them, people that have walked their path that can guide them on their journey?
Definitely be willing to make investments in finding events. So for instance, for me, when it comes to like women's empowerment speaking, I started reading books and then I paid attention to who connected with me. So you can start out Googling, best, books for whatever your topic is, and then pick up some of those books from the library. And then when you start finding individuals that you connect with, start finding out, go to their website, find out what they're doing, what conferences they're involved with, what programs that they have, and then really make the investment to invest into that person's program, get under their coaching, their mentorship, or what have you. What I've found is when it comes to really successful mentors, there are a lot of people who are saying that they want to learn, but there's a big difference between those who say they want to be entrepreneurs and those who take action on it. So a lot of mentors, before they'll take someone as a mentee, they'll want to see the action. They'll want to see that you're serious, that you've invested your time. So before you kind of really reach out to someone and ask them to mentor you, make sure that you've taken the initiative to do what you can do on your own first.
And what are some of the challenges that perhaps you faced individually in becoming a transformational speaker, hurdles that you had to jump over as someone new in the industry? And what tips can you give anyone who's trying to become an authority figure in their particular field that maybe they can learn from?
Most definitely. There were quite a few hurdles, and there's still hurdles daily. One of the biggest things was doing the internal work and believing that I was worthy of my dream, of believing that it was possible, of believing that I had something worthy to say. Those were some struggles. So the only way that I overcame that was to put myself out there and to get feedback. So it doesn't sound good, but you constantly want to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Like, I am consistently doing things on a daily basis that scare the mess out of me, but you just have to do it. You don't know until you do. And it's important to have a goal and a vision, but be flexible in how you get there. Where I am today is different from where I thought I was initially going when I started, but I'm so happy that I was flexible and allowed myself to get here. So I hope that answers your question. Definitely pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone was one of the hurdles for me, was learning to do that, dealing with my worth and learning to believe that there were possibilities for me, and then connections and relationships. So in the beginning, one of the hurdles I had was, I don't know who to work with or who can help me, but I really had to just put myself out there. Like I said, I've gone to 8 conferences. The most beautiful thing about business in this day and age is that when you never know when you go somewhere what type of relationships you'll get from meeting people. And I cannot say enough of the value of relationships and meeting people and speaking up about what you want to do. I've formed so many relationships in the past year just from putting myself out there, going to conferences, even on social media. When I see someone who I think is doing something wonderful, I reach out to them. One of the first things I did is I did a 10-week series for domestic violence victims. It was a global movement. I created it in 2 weeks. And at that point, I really was a nobody. I was just getting started. But I found women who were doing phenomenal things with domestic violence or journaling or what have you. And I just cold contacted them. I just emailed them. I poured my heart out. I told them what I was passionate about. And I ended up getting 13 speakers from around the world. Some had tons of followers. Like, one of them has a blog where she has 80,000 readers of her blog. One of them is a Nobel Prize winner. So just put yourself out there and speak about your why. Like, why is this important to you? Why is your heart in this? And you'll be surprised how people connect with you.
Well, the key thing I picked out was believing in yourself and putting yourself out there, because many times some of the reasons as to why we don't venture out into our passionate businesses is because we're scared we might fail, or perhaps that we might get negative feedback. And that sort of feedback might prevent us from moving forward because we're afraid of the criticism. So I agree with you in terms of putting yourself out there. And yes, you might not like what you hear, but at least it will help you, pivot in the right direction and get the product out there that's right for your audience.
Most definitely. I agree.
And also the why. Once people know why you're doing something, it gives them a reason to back you in a way. Because if you have something that you're doing and perhaps it just looks like you're doing it for the sake of money, then it might not appeal so much to your audience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's so many individuals who are out there doing things, sometimes for the wrong reasons. And a big part of my brand is authenticity, about being authentic and real and genuine. And that's one of the beautiful things about technology, is that when you're genuine and when your heart is in something, people can even pick that up through technology, through your videos, through your audios, your podcasts. And there's an attraction that comes with that. So even I love when the quote that says, when you're concrete on your why, the how shows up. So when you really are clear on your purpose and who you're called to serve, sometimes you don't have all the plans and the framework figured out, but when you focus on the passion of the why, the how ends up showing up for you.
Simon Sinek has a very good TED Talk where he talks about start with why. It definitely addresses that clearly.
I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
You mentioned that you read a lot of books, and I read books myself, but the challenge I find sometimes is when I'm reading these business books, they're so good that after I've put one down, I quickly pick another and read it and then put it down, and I don't actually get the time to implement some of the stuff that I've read, which I found inspirational. So what steps do you take after reading a book that has, valuable content for you? How do you implement that? Do you implement it first and then pick up another book, or how do you approach that?
Sure, that's a great question. Evernote is one of my favorite softwares ever. Um, so with Evernote, do you use Evernote? Are you familiar with that?
I am, yes, but I don't use it.
Okay, no problem. So with Evernote, what I do is I create a notebook for every book. And I have Evernote on my computer and on my phone. So if someone's not familiar, Evernote's a cloud-based software that you can, have on your phone or computer. And so what I do actually is when I'm reading a book, I create a notebook for it. And then things that stick out to me, I write those in the notebook. Sometimes I've had times where I'll just highlight the page and then I'll put a tab in it so later I can transfer typing that into Evernote. I also do voice memos. So I'll read something and I'll say, like, page 62, I read this and it made me think about blah, blah, blah. And then I can record that voice memo and save it into the notebook for that book. There are times where I take things and I implement them immediately. Like if it's something, like for instance, I read Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles. And there were so many jewels in that book that I was like, oh, I need to apply that immediately into my business or how I do things. Whereas some books I'll read where it's like, okay, trying to think of a book I read that was like that. Like Deepak Chopra, I think it's like The Secrets of Success or something. One of those books, it had a lot of mindset, psychology or principles that I liked, but those I just took note of to come to later to reference. I believe the statistic is that if you don't act on a thought on 5 seconds, you lose it, is I believe what it is. So I actually have a post-it note on my wall that says, when I think of something, to act on it immediately, either record a thought, write it down or something so that I can hold on to that. And going through as many books as I do, I had to have a note-taking mechanism. And I love quotes, so that's another thing. If I read a book and there's a quote that really compels me, I'll write it in Evernote so I can remember where it came from.
Personally, I have a notepad on my phone, so I do what you do with Evernote, only that I put it in my phone. Another technique I use is there's a website, I think it's called summary.com. I'm not sure, but it's got summaries of all the books. So if you read a book that's, say, 50-something pages, the summary.com will have something like 4 pages. So it will just pick out the essential parts of the book, and you can just go through it in something like 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite books?
Okay, there's so many. I love Martha Beck, Finding Your North Star. I love Iyanla Vanzant, In the Meantime. Jack Canfield, The Success Principles. Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. There's a book by Nirka, who's not as well known yet. I think she's someone who's definitely coming into her own right. And she has a book called Supreme Influence. So a lot of books that deal with mindset and ways to really re-examine our thought processes, our foundational beliefs, and to really shift our lives. Books like that I really love. I soak those up.
And if you had a time machine, so basically if you could travel back in time and meet yourself as an 18-year-old, what book would you give yourself to read that you think would impact you then? And what movie would you recommend that came out between that time and today? So a movie that was coming out in the future that you tell yourself you've got to watch this movie when it comes out.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That's a hard question. I think Martha Beck, Finding Your North Star. I would tell my past self to read that book. What's interesting, I didn't share this with you, is that when I was about 19, about right before I dealt with domestic violence, I was on a flight and I was in first class and I sat next to a life coach. And she ended up telling me about life coaching and I was so magnetized to it. And when I followed up with her to ask her the requirements of being a life coach, she said that you had to have like a master's, because at that time, 10, 11 years ago, life coaching was just becoming popular. And I remember, because I was just starting college, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not interested in in that. But what's interesting is that now coaching is something that's so common. And it turns out you're not required to have a master's. There's programs you can do in a year to become a life coach. So that book, I would tell my younger self to read it. One, because Martha Beck wrote a powerhouse book on finding your purpose and your calling and the internal shifts you need to do to make that happen. And also by reading her book, I would have found out about her coaching program. So that's a book. A movie, wow. This sounds silly, but my favorite movie of all time is The Wiz, and it's from the 70s. And still to this day, I don't know if it's just emotional connection. That's still my favorite movie. But I noticed that when I was going at 18, when I was going through some difficulty, I wasn't really watching that movie then. So I actually would just remind myself to watch that movie some more.
The Wiz, what's it all about?
Sure. The Wiz is a depiction of the Wizard of Oz, but it's an all black cast. So Michael Jackson is the Scarecrow, and Diana Ross is Dorothy. So it's this powerhouse movie. It's fun. It's full of music, and of course, just like the Wizard of Oz, the moral of the story is really that all that you seek is within you, and home is a place inside your heart. And it's really a dreamer's movie, so it resonates with me even to today.
Wow, interesting. Well, you've told us what book you'd give yourself in the past, what movie you'd recommend. Now let's shift to the future. If you could send a message to yourself in the future with a piece of encouragement or advice that you can refer back to and absorb, what would it be? A message for yourself?
A message for myself. I would really tell myself that believe in the impossible. The detour is the path, and find joy in the journey. That's the message I'd tell myself. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you're a life coach, and we haven't had an opportunity to break down what exactly a life coach does. Could you give us just a hint as to what it is that you help people achieve as a life coach?
Sure. So as a coach, it's really about goal setting. So my focus when I work with clients is to identify what's a goal that they want to achieve, and then helping them to shift their life to achieve that goal. So I call myself an inside out success coach because with my clients, it's not about, reaching a goal that's X amount of dollars. It's about finding a goal that gives you fulfillment. Like, what do you need internally? Are you lacking self-love? You have limiting beliefs about your worth? And then if we manifested that in your life, what would that look like? Because a lot of times we set monetary goals when really what we want is a loving relationship or a job that gives us fulfillment. So I work with my clients to set goals. And a part of that is really listening and being intuitive about what someone's really saying. Because sometimes we say words out of our mouth, but what we're saying is not really what we mean. So as a coach, it's really my goal to listen and pick up the signs of limiting beliefs or find out how someone's getting in their own way, and really to hold up the mirror so that they can see what's going on and then shift their behaviors and actions for that. So it's kind of like an accountability partner that is really listening to what's going on internally with you. So there's two different capacities that I do that. So I have clients that I work with one-on-one, and in that we're working together weekly, and we do like 45-minute calls where I'm listening to them. We're setting goals. I give them assignments for journaling and hold them accountable. And then I also do monthly coaching through my membership community. And with monthly group coaching, what that is I do a teaching, and then all of the women on the call share what's going on with them. And that's really powerful as well, especially for survivors of domestic violence, because they get to hear stories from other women that they can relate to, who inspire them. And so kind of the breakthroughs happen from the women, in that coaching capacity.
Wow. Well, I've asked you a lot of questions today, and now it's your turn to ask me a question. If this were your podcast and the tables were turned, what's the one question you'd ask me?
I would love to ask you, with this podcast, you get to interview so many entrepreneurs. What has been the biggest aha moment? What's been the greatest learning you've had from all of these interviews that you get to do?
Most times when I interview entrepreneurs, they ask me, why did you start this podcast? What is it that, motivates you to keep doing what you're doing? Initially, in hindsight, I wanted to monetize the podcast, and that was kind of like my primary goal. But as I kept getting the feedback of, wow, what you're doing is really nice, it's noble, keep going, and so on, I realized that there is more to what I'm doing than just hoping to make some money off of it. And that's what really, really inspired me to keep doing what I'm doing. So that's one of the aha moments I had, yeah. And also, learning how down to earth some of these people are. There are a few guests I've approached who are really, really successful, and I'm sure you've had the same experience when you approach your mentors, is you have this perception of somebody who's successful, who's made it, and yet when you speak with them, they're really down to earth, they're humble, and they're just like anybody else. And so it just makes you realize we're all human beings, and meeting these people makes you understand the fact that anybody can make it because they're no different from each and every one of us.
I love that. That is powerful, what you just said. And that's absolutely beautiful because you're really transforming minds through your work and through your interviews. And there's definitely many ways to monetize it. Of course, there's no shame in, monetizing something because, that's the way to continue being able to do it. Sometimes we're not able to continue things because we don't have the financial means to do it. So, but it's beautiful to have something you're passionate about that's helping people that eventually can turn into a business in itself. So I encourage you, whatever that goal is for you, to keep doing it.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. Well, lastly, how can people learn more about your business, Self-Discovery Diva? How can they get in touch with you in terms of social media or your website?
Sure. So if someone's on Facebook, if you just look up Self-Discovery Diva, I have my Facebook page, Self-Discovery Diva. Also, I love to hear from people, specifically if there's women who've survived abuse and you'd like someone to talk to, or if you're just an entrepreneur who has questions, definitely email me at selfdiscoverydiva@gmail.com. I'm very responsive. I'm very open to hear. So I'd say those are the best ways. Also, if you'd like to read my book, I just actually released a book October 1st called The Puzzle Pieces of Me. And you can find that book at www.thepuzzlepiecesofme.com.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Liz, for your time today. We really appreciate it. We've learned so much from you, and I definitely wish you the very best in your business, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Let's stay in contact. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to Business Mike today. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes just like this one, simply go to businessmike.com. I would love to hear from you and get to know what you think about the show. If you have any questions or suggestions, just drop me an email at daudi@businessmike.com. That's DAUDI@businessmike.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next Monday, take care.